So understanding markup, which is a common thing that people want to know, it seems very logical in terms of business and selling items, what the markup might be. But there is a little bit of a difference what sometimes people think of markup, and that is confusing it with just profit. So there is a slight difference. So I'm going to go over in this video over what actually markup is, and I'll try to do it visually so it's a little bit easier to understand. I'll give you maybe a common example sometimes that you will see if you're studying that you might run into, so you'll see this markup in action. And I will talk about and define the rate of markup, and that will be based on the cost and on the selling price or on the list price of the item. So let's get into it. I have this little piece which you can think of as the price that you would have for selling an item. So this entire piece here, okay, represents basically the price, and this would be in dollar amounts, and that is the whole price for a company to sell their item for. And sometimes this is referred to as a list price if you are possibly studying merchandising chain and trade discounts, and you can watch a video on that on this channel as well. So what composes this selling price, right? What are all the components that come into it? Now, one of the common and maybe obvious components is it's going to cost you money in order to maybe purchase raw materials, make the product, and so on. And that cost has to be incorporated into the selling price. Now, of course, that cost may vary. I will kind of set it, okay, at this point right here. And this right here would represent my cost. Now, cost I'm going to refer to as capital C, and that cost is basically, if you're a company, maybe like a manufacturer or something, okay, this would be the cost of making the actual item, or possibly if you were buying it from someone else and then reselling it, then this would be the cost of purchasing that you would have to kind of swallow when you are working with these. Now, there's a remaining piece in this selling price, and of course you set that, you vary that as a company, and it typically will include two really key components which go and hand in hand with understanding what markup is. So one of the components which sometimes people forget about, okay, so it is an additional cost that you continuously have occurring when you're running a business. And this particular cost that you have here, it is not the same as making the product or purchasing the product, because once you actually make it and purchase, it just kind of sits there as a product. But you have continuous costs, and those costs are your operating expenses. And that should make sense to you because you're operating a business, so you have these operating expenses that you are continuously running into. And these particular expenses that we have, sometimes this is referred to as, in the business world, as overhead that you run into. So you may see that term as well. And that kind of operating expenses or overhead, I will designate it as kind of capital E. Now, the remaining component, which again, you are free to choose, so this right here, okay, so this is basically your profit that you will make. And one thing that I should mention here, I am referring to all of this on a per unit basis. So this is per one item. So that particular profit that we have, okay, I will refer it, okay, in terms of kind of creating equations here, it will be just capital P. And that particular profit, or the net profit that you have, so here it's the net profit, okay, that will include kind of the three component and pieces of a selling price. So your selling price that you have, okay, your selling price S, or maybe your list price L, if you like to call that, then what you will have is it is composed of your cost, okay, so that was right here of making or purchasing, your actual overhead or operating expenses that you have, so that is E, okay, so that's right here, that was that component, and then you have your profit. So it is made up of kind of three pieces that we have. And now what people mostly think about markup is they actually think that markup is the net profit, and it is not. So when you are talking about a markup, then what you have is your markup is actually this piece right here. Okay, so this includes your operating expenses and it includes your net profit. So that's what you have. That is actually your markup. So here I'm going to write, okay, so markup that we have. And by the way, markup has many different names. Sometimes you may see it, okay, as known as margin. And sometimes you may even see it as simply saying this is the gross profit, okay, because it is certainly not the net profit that we have. Okay, so gross profit includes the operating expenses. And what you have is therefore that particular markup, and I'll designate it as M, is equal to, okay, your operating expenses plus your profit. So that's what you have right there. Now, okay, so the other thing is sometimes it is useful to know that you have, okay, so your total cost of actually per item that you have, okay, is the cost of making or purchasing that particular item plus all your operating expenses that you have, right? So this visually kind of tells you what the selling price or what the list price includes. And so now once we have this, okay, so let's take a look at an example and how we can actually utilize this in action, because it's not always that simple. So here I kind of created or pre-created an example. So you have a wholesale company, okay, they have purchased a product and they have purchased the product for $100 less 3%, okay, sorry, less 5% and 3%. So there is a discount series here. So this is kind of like a trade discount. And you can watch the video on the channel if you want to know about trade discounts. And now they're telling us that the overhead expenses that we have are 30% of the cost. And your profit, okay, so when selling the item, okay, you want to set it at 15% of the cost. All right. And you have a bunch of questions here. So let's take a look. Okay, so first, let's knock off this one. So what is the cost for the product? So what we're looking for here is we're looking for this piece right here. Okay, so what is the actual cost? So for A, okay, so what we have is, well, we are told, okay, that we have, okay, so this is our kind of list price from, okay, maybe we're buying this from the manufacturer, it is $100. So this is not our cost yet because we have received two discounts. So we have a discount of 5%, and 5% as a decimal is that. We have a discount of an additional 3%, so that is 0.03. And now we want to find what is the cost to us. So basically what we're trying to find is we're trying to find the net price that we paid. Okay, so our cost is equal to the net price that we actually paid. Now, you may recall, okay, from trade discounts that in order to find this, okay, you need to find the net price factor. So we have 1 minus our first discount, which is 0.05. So that's right here. We multiply it by, okay, the second discount here, and that is 1 minus 0.03, and multiplied by the actual list price that they had. Okay, so that was that. So now I can substitute all of this back in. Okay, so I'm going to bring out the calculator here for us. Whoops, I did the wrong thing here. All right, so let's do it. So we have 1 minus 0.05 in brackets times 1 minus 0.03, okay, and multiplied by $100. So we paid $92.15. So that was our purchase price, and therefore this is our cost that we have, okay, within. So that's the first item that they asked about. So there you go. Okay, so that's the cost for the product to us. Now our expenses, okay, so our overhead expenses, they have told us that the overhead expenses are 30% of the cost. So in that case, right, so we have 30% of the cost. And the way that we write this is the word of means multiply. So this is 30%, okay, times our cost, okay, and those are our overhead expenses. And because we already know our cost, we just did it in the previous example or previous component of the example. So this is what that would be. So let me do that. So I already have that multiplied by 0.3 or the 30%, and that turns out to be 27, okay, and I'm going to round it to the cent, so 65. So that is my kind of operating expenses that I have. All right, so it is pretty substantial. Okay, so I have my cost, I have my expenses. So if I go back here, so now I have calculated this component. So I have my cost and operating expenses. The next item that they ask about is they want to know what the profit is. So my profit right here, so I'm going to write it as part C. And my profit, okay, they are telling me is 15% of cost in this particular example. So 15% of the cost. Again, you change always the percent back to decimal. This is multiply, okay, and this is cost. So that is your profit in this case. It doesn't have to be 15%. You can just set the profit as you like. Just this particular example has it this way. So I have 0.15 multiplied by my cost, which was 92.15. So I can do that. So let me clear this, do the multiplication, and I have my profit is equal to $13.82. Again, I am rounding to the cent. So great, now I have my profit. Okay, so that is right here. Now with these things, okay, now that I have them all, you can see what else that they want. So they are now looking for, they say, what is the markup, okay, or the margin on this item. So remember, right, so markup, which we had right here, so that was my markup, okay, right there, okay, that particular markup is your operating expenses plus your profit. So let's do that. That would be component D. So my markup is equal to my operating expenses plus the profit. Now, my operating expenses, so if I scooch up here, was $27.65, and my profit was $13.82. So now adding these up, so 27 that I have, 0.65 plus 13.82, and that gives you a markup of 41.47. And that completes, okay, that part D. So this is the markup that we had. What else did they want? Okay, so they kind of wanted one more item. So let's provide that for them. What would the selling price be? Well, I mean, I have everything actually here. Okay, so remember that when you are solving, okay, so my selling price was equal to, and that was your cost plus your operating expenses plus your profit. Or, okay, so again, remember, this is cost plus your operating expenses plus profit. This was nothing else but markup. So this is also a good useful equation to have because sometimes they might give you the markup directly. And we actually have these numbers, so this will make our life a little bit easier. So this was 92.15 for the cost, and I just worked out the margin, okay, or the markup, which is 41.47. And therefore now, okay, let me just double check. Yes, the cost was 92.15. So I have my markup, okay, plus 92.15, and that would tell you what the selling price is, or what the new list price for whoever you are selling it to would be. All right, so that would complete this example, which is a neat example to know and see this thing in action. Okay, so the last component that I had here on our agenda, we wanted to define this rate of markup. So what the heck is the rate of markup? Because at times you might be asked about this rate of markup. Well, it's nothing special, to be honest with you. So we have the rate of markup, and there are basically two types of rates of markup. So I'm going to make up my own little subscript here. So it's R, or acronym, so which is for rate. Now, the first markup, okay, I'm going to talk about is the markup based on cost. And that is nothing else but your markup divided by your cost. So it doesn't include your operating expenses, it's just your cost. And then you multiply this by 100. So this right here is your rate of markup based on cost. So you basically want to compare, okay, how your markup stacks up against the cost for this particular item. And you want to see it as a percent. And for our example, so the one that we just did, so I can calculate this. So this is for example. So our markup, okay, so which we, okay, had, and I'm going to go back here. Okay, so the markup was 41.47. So this was 41.47. That was the markup divided by, and then our costs. Okay, so that was 92.15. And if we multiply this by 100%, we're going to get exactly what we want. So 41, okay, 0.47 divided by 92.15 equals, so that's actually dead on 45% there. Okay. Okay, so notice you have that. Okay, and just going to round it because all those decimal places are a little bit further off. So that's what we have. So that is your rate, okay, of markup based on cost. So that's how you would calculate it. And as you would guess, if you wanted to know the rate on the selling price, so based on the selling price, that would be your markup divided by your selling price. So you want to now compare your markup to your selling price. And I'm not going to do the computation. You can do that if you like. And that is actually it for these rates of markup. So you have a rate of markup based on cost, and you have a rate of markup which is based on the selling price. So those are the two. All right, so that completes our agenda that we had. So we talked about markup, how to break it down. Okay, I showed you an example. Okay, and then I kind of defined and showed you the formulas for the rate of markup. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful.